Hello, everyone. Happy Thursday, and more importantly, happy live stream Thursday. And today's an extra happy one because it is our release party for the April VS Code release. So I know that this is always a really exciting time. We've got a couple of people from the VS Code team that we'll hear from. We got Sana, Raymond, and Karthik coming on to talk about some of the highlights that you'll be seeing. And kind of looking in the chat, we have someone who really segued this well for me. Badashi. I see your first comment was, is there a changelog available yet? That is a great question. So y'all are actually getting a nice sneak peek because the release is not going live until 11 Pacific time this morning. So we still got a few hours there. If you've been on VS Code Insiders, you've had a chance to kind of play around with these features. But if not, we will have the release notes and the release live at 11 Pacific time today. So with that, I also kind of wanted to just go through a couple of thank yous that we have to the awesome community that we have here. Honestly, we couldn't have done a lot of this without you. This will be at the bottom of our release notes when they get published. But for now, I just want to, obviously, there's a lot, so I'm not going to be able to speak to every single person, but I just want to take the time to scroll through and really just say thank you to all these people. We've got great web extension contributors, issue tracking, so many great PR contributions. So if you're here, thank you so much. We really appreciate it and couldn't do it without you. And this is also a great plug. If you want to get more involved with this, we are always looking for more contributors. So this is absolutely a great way. We will love to acknowledge y'all. And really just thank you for that. So with that, what we have up first is going to be Sana, who will be talking to us a little bit about settings profiles and some updates we have there. So do we want to go ahead and bring Sana on?
Hello. Hi, Olivia.
How's it going?
Good. Yeah. So I'm going to talk about profiles, which is actually a preview feature in this release coming up. But it's been something that has been asked for by the community for a long time. And I think it's an exciting thing that we've been working on also for a while. And I'm excited to see it in preview at least. So I'll go through and share my screen now.
Awesome. Can't wait.
So here is like the GitHub issue originally that we created for user profiles. And this is like a conglomeration of a lot of different issues related to this. There were a lot of asks of being able to use VS Code for like a specific mode. For instance, if I'm only doing Java development, I only really want Java related settings and extensions in my VS Code. So this is kind of taking that user feedback and coming up with a solution for it. There were some other, related issues about being able to being able to enable disable extensions from a file, having something like a user profile, or even in the education scenario, being able to, as a teacher, if you want to give like a minimal version of VS Code with like some of the UI hidden or like the specific extensions for your classroom, you can now do that with this profiles functionality. So let me show you what that means. So here's my VS Code, and I've customized it a little bit. Like I have all my settings already in here, but let's customize it a little bit further. So for instance, if I wanted to, like, as an educator, say, like hide, for instance, the status bar because I don't think it's useful for my students. If I wanted to hide some of the different icons in here, so for instance, let's hide the run and debug, and maybe let's hide extensions. And something else as an educator that I like to do is have the terminal set up in here so that students don't have to deal with this bottom one. Students don't have to deal with this bottom one. Let's see. And then I'm going to bring this back up. Yeah. So this is like kind of the setup I want. Maybe we can do one more thing by going into the settings. And then let's say I make the font size 14, right? So here I want my extensions and I want these settings and UI state to now be exported or contained within a single profile. So now there's a new command to be able to export settings as a profile. So let's, for instance, just save this, and you can see it creates this .code-profile JSON file. And it really just is a JSON file. And now, like, I've exported this profile, I've saved it locally on my computer, and so now I have this new VS Code opened. This is, this is a completely like fresh install of VS Code. So like, there's literally no settings in here. Yeah, there's no settings. Like, this is like, imagine a student is now opening up VS Code. They've downloaded it fresh. So now they want to take their professor's profile that was exported to them. And so now they can go ahead and import settings from a profile. This is going to overwrite the settings that they have on their machine, but I can import from a specific file, or you can import from a URL. So for now, let's go with the local file that we just saved. And now you can see that like the setting is like the profile is being applied, right? So all of the professor's key bindings, UI extensions are now being applied to the students, and then they can like add some additional customizations on top of this to this profile. So you saw, like, for instance, the status bar disappeared. Yeah, like all the extensions are being installed. So if I hid a lot of those earlier things in the status bar, but for instance, if I show it again, I can show you that the extensions that we had in my previous profile are now slowly being installed. So this is kind of a way to get everything that like one user or like, one tutorial, one professor is recommending, and being able to like immediately get to it. So you can have this, for instance, if you want just a Java profile and only have Java related settings or extensions, you can do that. A Python one, a web dev one, something for the team if you maintain a team profile. Yeah. So then another quick thing I want to show is that you can also have done this from a URL. So for instance, I have this GitHub, this like code.profile JSON file here as a gist. So now actually I'm going to replace that with the one we just added. Oh no, my VS Code is crashing. All right, here, yeah, cool. So let's provide the URL instead of the local one. And that one just had one setting, which was a theme change. I got my status bar. I got a lot of the icons back here. So like I overrode the setting the profile I previously added in, and now I have a new profile. Yeah. So
this is so cool because I love that you can just import it and it shows automatically, right? You don't have to restart, like it's there and there's no waiting kind of to see the change take effect.
Yeah.
Cool. So can you go over a little more? Because I know the first time you kind of showed it was completely blank settings and then you imported a profile. What if I had a bunch of settings in there and then imported a profile? Is it going to merge them or just completely override it?
Yeah. So in this case right now, it's going to overwrite them. But we're working on like the ability, or like as this is a preview feature, some of the next things we want to work on are like the ability to maybe potentially revert back to a profile. So say I added something, but I wasn't sure what the changes it was going to provide were. I want to go back to my settings. Or if I have a second profile, I want to go back to the first one. So we'll work on some kind of functionality for that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that. And it's a great opportunity too for people, since it's in preview, to start playing around with it, give us y'all's feedback and really see, what do you want to see from this, right? Do you want to be able to have that merge? Do you want to be able to revert? What kind of features do you want to be able to see in this? So definitely keep us updated on that. And just, I think we got some people coming in late. So just a quick, when will this release be available? In just a few hours. It's going live at 11 Pacific time. So y'all will have access to this. If y'all have noticed, Sana is actually demoing out of green VS Code, right? So you'll see that her icon is green there. That means she's an insider. So just a quick plug for insiders too. If y'all aren't already in it, it's a great way to kind of see what's going on prior to the official release. I also think that this gives a really good opportunity because we get a lot of times when we are giving demos or posting TikToks or anything like that, we'll get so many comments that are like, how do you have your VS Code set up? What theme is this? What is this? I feel like it kind of opens a really cool door for people to start publicizing their profile settings.
Yeah.
So that way people can start, it's really easy. Be like, oh, hey, here's my link to my GitHub. Go ahead and import this. And then you can have it in no time.
Yeah, like imagine you're maybe following a tutorial, and then that like the author of the tutorial like has published their profile, so you can like follow along exactly with what their VS Code looks like, and it makes it a whole lot easier.
Absolutely. We're getting some good feedback in the chat. this is a great example too. So Sana kind of went through, right? If maybe you're a student and you're going through this, but there's so many different contexts that this is super helpful. So like you said, Gerard, if new team members join, it is super easy to just be like, okay, these are all the extensions we have. This is how I have it set up. It's super easy. And then you're not like lost on your first day of like, how did you even get that? Where are you going? It's already set up for you. So there's really so much potential with this. Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much, Sana. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Maybe what's on the roadmap a little more?
Yeah, so like as we're working on this, some other things we want to work on is like the ability to maybe manage multiple profiles or like delete them. Right now, if you add a new profile, it will replace the previous one. So like some ability to manage multiple at the same time. We really want to work on what you said about like the ability to publicize them or like distribute them. So we want all the feedback about like what you see for the potential in this as well. This has definitely been a feature that's come mostly from the community and like a lot of the problems and use cases that they have. So we want to continue to hear from everyone about what they could potentially use this for.
Cool. So one quick question. Does this currently work if you have custom fonts installed on your computer? Will it catch those?
I don't know if it will grab like the local, like if you have like the .tff, like whatever the font file is, I don't think it will grab that. So probably not.
Okay, cool. But something to play around with, and maybe it's a future request. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sana. We really appreciate it. I'm super pumped to try this out and kind of play around and see all the different settings. It's kind of also a good trial period, right? It's like you don't want to quite commit yet. You can just save it to a profile, try it out for a little bit, and then go back.
Yeah. Thanks, Olivia.
All right. So up next, we've got Raymond, who's going to talk a little bit about some new features for the settings editor filter. So Raymond, how's it going?
Morning, yeah, it's going fine here. Ready to share my screen and so on.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, well, let's go ahead and dive on in and see what you have set up for us.
Cool. So right now I'm already in the settings editor, but just a small tip, the way that I usually get to the settings editor is through Control comma. If you have a custom key binding, it might be different though. So now that we're in the settings editor, there's this new button over here. So then the question is, what does this button do? So if we press it, it gives us a few options. So let's just try this out. So let's say we want extension ID. Okay. And then we go down to remote hub, for example. And then it shows extensions specific to remote hub. And now let's say that we want modified. This shows settings that I have already modified on my user JSON file. So like settings that I have over here that I modified, they will show over here, and all the modified settings have these blue bars next to them. Let's see if there's one I can reset just to show what happens. Yeah. So in this case, the blue bar disappears. So it turns out that these filters, like when you type an @ and then you get these suggestions, they were already there in the first place, but the filter button hopefully makes it more evident that these filters exist. Oh, and there's also one for online services, if you care a lot about telemetry and so on.
That's great. Yeah, because I feel like a lot of times people don't know, like if you just type @ that it's going to bring that up. So having this kind of surface to the top is super helpful.
Yeah, and it turns out that modified and online services, these were actually in this menu over here in the past, but I mean, I personally don't click on the overflow menu very often, so I missed out on that. But I put it here now, so hopefully it's more evident. Also, language. So language is interesting. This is a feature that's been in the settings JSON file for a long time, but in the settings UI, it wasn't actually really possible to see language-specific settings. So let's see what I mean by that. So I do @lang TypeScript. Now the tab names have changed. The settings, there's still a lot of settings that show up. So let's see what it actually means. So over here, cursor style. Let's see, let's change this to block. And then we go over here for the settings JSON file just to see what it did. And then we see that it set this setting specifically for the TypeScript language. So what does that actually look like? So we go to a TypeScript file. You see that the cursor now is in a block shape. And it's blinking. If we go to a non-TypeScript file, it's still, that setting hasn't been applied. It's still a regular line cursor. So this feature is really helpful because in the past, you would always have to go to the settings JSON file, which you could also do using this button. But yeah, in the past, you would always have to go here, manually type something up. And for users who are more comfortable with the graphics, like the UI settings editor, now they can just use language filters and just modify the settings around there.
That's awesome. Because I think a lot of people like to kind of have like very separate looks depending on what sort of projects they're working on. So a lot of times they'll just control that by themes, but I feel like this gives you a whole new kind of way to control what it's going to look like. So you can do all those different styles, and you know that, you know, if you're in a TypeScript file, that you're going to see it like that. If you're JavaScript, the other way. So I think that it really opens that realm of possibility to start customizing even more.
Yeah.
So if people have a normal like non-language specific setting and then they add one of these language specific settings, what happens? Like which one's going to win?
Yeah, that one's interesting. So there's user settings, there's workspace settings. If you ever opened a remote, or if you ever opened a multi-root workspace, there's also remote settings and folder settings, as they call it. And it turns out that language specific settings always win. So a user language specific setting will even win over a non-language specific workspace folder setting. Yep.
Okay, cool. So it's basically always going to trump it if you have that language specific one set. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
We're getting a lot of comments that people love your pink theme. I do too, the light pink.
Yeah. Let's see if I could actually promote whose extension this is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because I think it's really nice.
It is. It's easy on the eyes. It's nice.
Should be this one by MGWG. Yeah, light pink theme.
Nice. Love that. Cool. So what's kind of up next then for the settings editor? Because I know that we've kind of slowly been surfacing these to the front, kind of trying to make it as intuitive as possible. So what's kind of on the roadmap there?
Yeah, so there's actually something interesting where even in the settings JSON file, users can't really tell that this happens. So let me just make a new file, and I'll change this to a markdown file. And what should happen if I type a really long string is that it word wraps. So it's not one, well, it is one super long line, but I see it as like multiple lines because it's wrapping. Over here, if I do the same thing, it should not word wrap. Yeah, okay. And the reason why it does that is because if I go to editor.wordwrap, I see that it's off, but if I do @lang markdown to apply the markdown language filter, I can see that it's actually on now, but at the same time, there's no blue bar over here, so I didn't set it to on. So the question is, who set it to on? And it turns out that extensions can actually override the default values of language-specific settings. And this is not evident from my settings JSON file because the editor.wordwrap setting doesn't even show up here. And in the settings editor, it's not evident either. There's nothing saying, oh yeah, your default value was actually overridden by this setting for a language specific setting. So that's a feature that we still have to work on to expose that information to users.
Okay, so basically you could install an extension that updates that and you have no idea that it did it until you go in and kind of dig through.
Yep.
Okay. What happens if you have like two competing extensions? Like you have one that overrides it in different ways. Is it just like takes the most recent one?
Yeah, that one's interesting. I think it depends on whatever order the backend sees it first, really.
Right.
Like it's really a race in that case, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, no, I think that's super helpful because I feel like one of the worst things to happen is when you're just like trying to figure out why something looks a certain way and you're like, I know I didn't touch anything. So being able to actually see and like track that down would be very helpful.
Yeah, I think that's actually partially how this language filter feature came out in the first place. It's like, I can't tell why for this one language
Right.
something's happening. Yeah.
What have I done? Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much, Raymond. Love the editor. Love the theme. It's great. Anything else you want to add before we switch to the next?
Well, nothing else on my side. Thanks for having me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Always excited to have you and see really, firsthand what y'all have been working on. All right. Thanks, Raymond. And then last but not least, we have Karthik, who's going to be talking to us about some new Python extensions. I know we've got some Python fans in the chat, so let us know if you're excited for this one. Hey, Karthik, how's it going?
Going pretty good. So what I'm going to talk about today is we have a bunch of new extensions out. We have a Pylint extension, a black formatter extension, and an Isort extension. So this is something that we are experimenting with. We want to bring in more soon, but we started off with these 4 because our telemetry showed that these were the most popular packages. The thing that we are trying to do is the Python extension already supports black formatter and the Pylint linter and Isort and stuff like that. But we wanted to move them out of the Python extension into their own extension for a couple of reasons. I can bring, we can talk about that later, but I wanted to show what it does. We get a few benefit from doing that, and I can talk about that after I show what it does. So essentially, can you bring up my screen? I can.
Yes. There you go.
Right. So they are all in pre-release right now. So there is actually no release version. So you'll have to go and say install pre-release specifically to get them. So there is the black formatter. This has been out for probably a week. You can go download and use it with the current version of the VS Code and current version of the Python extension as well. So there is this Isort extension, which is also in pre-release. As you can see, this like pretty much hot off the press that you're going to see this one. Then there is the Pylint extension. So this has been out for probably a month now. So this was the first extension that we made in this format. So let me show you what it does, and then we can talk about what are the advantages and pros and cons of what we're doing. So as you can see here, I opened the file and instantly you could see a bunch of issues with it. So we can see that Isort now actually complains if sorting is not right. In our Python extension, it doesn't do that. You have to save your file, and if you have Isort enabled, it'll sort it, but you won't really see feedback on what is happening. And then you can also see Pylint complaining about lines that have some issues. So let's go ahead and fix one of those issues. And no, that's a really bad name for a parameter. So change that to expected and make sure that my test also uses that. Right. So now I'm going to hit save. Right. And you can see what happens. So it happened pretty quickly, but 2 things happened. I'm going to revert it a little bit to show what happened. Right. So this is what it was, and I hit save. And the first thing that happened was the Isort extension came into play, and it organized the imports. So you can see that the prime and PyTest switched location. So you see, it was primes and PyTest. So the usual order is you go with the standard library, then third party, then your user library. So the primes is coming from my own, so it goes last, and PyTest goes first. So that's what happened first. And then the next thing that happened was this live buffer was now handed off to black formatter, and then it went ahead and cleaned up the code, and then that's what you see at the end. And once all of this was done, we again checked with Pylint to see if there were any more problems. And once it looks like after we fixed the 2 things, there are no more problems. So it's
That
not
is
something that is
awesome. It's
different.
just
It's
like
not,
immediately I was like mind blown. Like you hit save and you're so casual about it and it just formatted it. That looks so good.
yeah, I mean, this is what happens in the Python extension too, but it doesn't work this way. There is no cascading. So you saw that it went from Isort, then to black, and then saved the file. There is no cascading in the Python extension because we tried to do this on save, and there is no order how this can occur. So yeah, this is what we are trying to do.
Cool. That's awesome. So really one of the benefits for this being separate from that Python extension is so we can start having kind of those separate steps that happen in the cascading there.
Yes, especially with the import sorting and the formatting step.
Right. Cool. Yeah. And thank you so much for kind of giving like the logic behind it, because I feel like I would have never realized why those imports switched, right? Like I feel like there's a lot of like underlying grammar and like best practices that you just, especially if you're self-taught, you don't know. So the fact that we kind of can get the insight into how it's ordered and everything like that is really helpful.
Yep. And I was going to say, like, one of the reasons why we are pulling these out into their own extension is that, let me show you here. So in my environment, there is no Isort. So there is no Isort, there is no black, there is no Pylint. I don't have to install it with these extensions. They all ship with it packaged. So you should just be able to install the extension. It should just work out of the box. Second thing was a lot of the code in the Python extension is written in TypeScript. So a problem that we saw was it was difficult for the community to contribute to any of the issues that occurred in the tooling. One thing is that we have lots and lots of tools, and it was harder for us to manage whenever there is a version change and causes some other changes in the system. It was harder for us to keep up with it. So by pulling them out into their own extension, we are hoping that it is easier for people to contribute. And you can see that like more than 65 to 70% of the code is now just Python. Most of the TypeScript code that is there here is actually boilerplate, and literally everything that the Pylint linter was doing is done here, and should be able to work with this and make all of the features work for work in the extension just by doing most of the stuff in Python now. So you should be able to access this repository from the marketplace. We have everything tied up. So
cool. Yeah, we can post some of the links if producers can get those. So we had one question. So I think you mentioned that you have to, these are kind of the pre-release installs. Is this available for Linux, for
yes.
all OS? Okay.
Yep.
Awesome.
You can use it on any operating system.
Cool. And then we had one other question. I don't know that this is necessarily in your wheelhouse, but basically they're having a lot of issues where they keep getting a prompt to select the interpreter and keep having to restart. Do you know why this might be, or it might just be we got to file an issue?
So that's not related to these extensions, but that's so we have been in the Python extension working on improving our interpreter discovery. One of the challenges that we have had was there are so many different distributions that we have to support that with each version change of those distributions, how they expose their interpreters has been different, and we have been trying to work with some of these distributions to make sure that we can detect them without having to actually execute the interpreter to see whether it works or not. So we have been working on that, and it's been a long running process. So if you are having issues, please file bugs so that we can investigate, and it'll not only help you but probably help others as well when we get to that. So Pratish, if you're running into some problem, please report it on the MS Python extension repository, and we'll definitely look into it.
Yeah, definitely a great plug, because chances are if it's happening to you, it's probably happening to someone else. It's also just a great way to track it. It gives you visibility. We'll be responding to that and can give you context and kind of keep you updated on if there's going to be any sort of update to that, and you know what happens there. Cool. And then we had someone who joined late. So can you just go over the extension names one more time and how to install them?
Oh, okay. So there is the black formatter extension. So let me see if I can uninstall. So you can just hit this install pre-release version. So there is no release version. There is just pre-release version right now. We'll soon release a preview edition of this with the release thing. But right now, we still want to get some feedback on, hey, whether is this working on all the cases that we are actually hoping that it would work on. Then there is the Isort extension and Pylint extension.
Awesome. Yeah. So then in the chat, we're going to be dropping those links so y'all can go straight to the marketplace and see what those look like. You can also just within VS Code search for those and they should pop up. And just remember, do that pre-release.
Yeah. And one last thing, we want to release the templates that we use to build these extensions out, so that if people have their own tools that, or if someone writes their own linter and they want to make an extension with it, they should be able to make that pretty easily. So we are going to release the templates themselves so that people can go create their own linter extensions or formatter extensions.
Awesome. Cool. So one question I did have, so some of y'all in chat might be familiar with language server protocol, the LSP. How is this different than this? Why would we choose this over LSP?
No, this is actually using LSP.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah. Great. So the Python extension one doesn't use LSP. This is completely written using LSP. So we have a Python language server implementation called PyGlass. That's from some other third-party person. So we are using PyGlass and layering the tools above PyGlass.
Okay, cool.
So PyGlass is just Python language server.
Okay, yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Karthik. Is there anything else you want to add? Maybe anything that's to come in future Python support?
Yeah, for these, we are planning on doing Flake8 and AutoPip8 next, probably. So that's something that we have planned on doing. But the big thing is the templates. So we are going to release the templates after we are happy with how this goes with a couple of tools that we are going to try out. And then we want people to try it out and create their own extensions.
Awesome. Sounds good. Well, thank you so much for coming. Really excited to see what else is in the works for Python, and excited to see kind of everyone's thoughts as they get these pre-release extensions and see how that can really help y'all.
Yep.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks, Karthik. All right. So thank you everyone for joining. We had great highlights here from Sana, Raymond, and Karthik. These are just a taste of everything that's in the release. So like I said earlier, the release is going live at 11 Pacific time today, so 2.5 hours-ish. And then y'all can see the entire release notes, start playing around with it. Great things to look for, right? We saw Sana talk about the settings profiles. That's in preview right now. So we'd love if y'all could play around with that and kind of give any feedback for what else you want to see. And really just, let us know what you like, what you don't like, keep us updated, give us that feedback, because we really do want to make this around what y'all want to see. So thank you to our presenters, Sana, Raymond, and Karthik. We really appreciate it. To our viewers, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're watching on YouTube right now, it's super easy to do so. We'll post videos periodically there, shorts, all that good stuff. We're pretty active. And then we also have a TikTok channel. So if you want to see us kind of break the mold a little bit, get a little sillier, that's where we're going to be doing that. And we will have at the start of next week a release highlight short. So we've been resurrecting those. We had one for the March release highlights. We're going to be doing another one for the April release highlights. It's going to be just a few of the highlights in 60 seconds or less. So it'll be just a really quick lightning speed overview of some of the great highlights. Some of the ones shown today will be there, but then also a couple of the others as well that you'll see in the release notes. So with that, thank you all for joining. We'll see you next week for another live stream, and let us know what you think of the release. Thanks, everyone.